Hi, everybody. Glad to be here. It's an honor and a pleasure. Thanks to David and friends. We have a great panel here. I think that we'll have a lot of fun this morning. Maybe we'll learn something. My name is Mark Anderson. I'm CEO of the Strategic News Service. And as you may know, if you read SNS, I spend a lot of my cycles looking at economic issues as well as at tech issues. So that's probably why I'm in this chair. We are joined today by Hill Ferguson from ZONG, Scott Guilfoyle from PayPal, Chris Kay from Citi, and Bill Sheedy from Visa. And we're going to talk about the future of currency. This could be really boring, but I'm going to try to make sure that never happens. To begin with, Peter had asked me, who was going to originally moderate this, to do a very quick review of currency, just to kind of set the tone that currency is a fungible thing. So clearly, we all know the history of currency. It could be whatever you want to call it. It could be coins. It could be paper. It could be backed by gold. It could be backed by silver. It could be backed by your mother's best wishes. And you know, historically in the Confederacy, that's exactly what happened. So we have lots of instances where currencies went bad, where inflation turned into hyperinflation, where people lost trust in the currency. And we're now facing a moment in time where we have lots of new opportunities or threats as regards currency going forward. And it's pretty exciting. There are some things, I'll make a couple comments about currency today because I think it's appropriate. And I thought I'd introduce also the idea of currency itself. And please feel free to disagree with this. And we're going to allow all of you into this conversation early on, so you'll have a way of doing that. I thought about currency a little bit yesterday and this morning, and it occurred to me that one definition, at least, of currency might be it is an instrument of trust in a transaction. And that's about the simplest way of describing what currency might be. It's an instrument of trust. So we have some ID guys here who are very interested in trust, and it doesn't describe what transaction or who's involved, but an instrument of trust in a transaction might be exactly what currency is, or we can at least start with that. I'd like to, before we launch into the future part of this, mention something which at SNS we call currency wars. So in the global economy, we've been through some interesting little dolphins lately. And the first one, in my opinion, was caused by a huge, a doubling actually, of liquidity in the global marketplace. So we went from, turns out, about $36 trillion of hot money in 2005 to double that amount about 5 years later. And no one was really paying attention. And so a lot of the problems that people say were caused by banks or by subprime things or crazy investments or derivatives, true enough, but those were more like symptoms. And the real problem was, why weren't we paying attention? And here's this huge inflow of hot money into the global world. And it was coming from a few discrete places that could have been identified, but no one was really bothering. And we don't even necessarily have regulators or people who are watching those things, who are taking care of those things. So everyone got caught flat-footed. Right after that, something fascinating happened with foreign exchange. Everyone knows about Bretton Woods and how, you know, we try to have markets for these things. So if you want to exchange $1 for a yen, there's a way that works. And you hope that it's driven by, in some way or other, markets. It may be that it starts with Bretton Woods after World War II, or it starts with some other meetings of the G20. But essentially, the idea is that a country has its own productivity, and that productivity leads to the value of its currency, if it's properly managed, and that leads to a comparable number in value for someone else's currency. So in a very simple sense, currency in those old days was a piece of the GDP kind of offset by how well managed investors felt things were going from day to day. If you triple your national debt, bad things will happen for you usually, unless you're American. So then something happened. People who ran these banks recognized, and countries recognized, that it was easier to make inroads in international trade by jiggering your foreign exchange rates than it was by working harder. And right around then, Europe started to fall apart for reverse reasons, which was the productivity rates were different in every country, and they were lockstep together, and they couldn't break apart, and so the whole thing started to kind of shake, which is where we are today. So we're in a position where, whether you're looking at China, with its PEG, which is kind of a daily intervention, whether you're looking at Japan with its history of kind of annual, semi-annual interventions, whether you're looking at a real market with the euro and some other currencies, where everyone's playing now by slightly different rules. They're not just letting the market determine the value of their currency. They're going in and buying, they're intervening directly and trying to get that extra pop, that 15% per year you just can't get out of your GDP. And it's definitely a winning game if you can do it. Trouble is, if everybody does it, no one wins. So that, I think I've set the table for where I believe we are in Forex and where paper currencies are working now today. And I'd like to go from that to the idea of maybe that's all yesterday, or much of it. I'd like to turn to Hill, Ferguson. ZONG is doing some of the most advanced work, I think, in this very area of where do you want to go next. And I'd love to hear your view of, take us from where I left us off and push us into the future.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be in such a distinguished company. We're the small fish represented on the panel as a small startup company. ZONG is a mobile payments business. We're a network of about 200 mobile operators in 40 countries and 1,000 some odd online merchants who accept our form of payment. And most of our online merchants are actually selling virtual currency to monetize their online audiences. So think of us as a payment instrument that's designed for people who are trying to make quick purchases of virtual goods and services in virtual environments, virtual worlds. Personally, I run marketing and product development for the company, and we see a lot of interesting things from the standpoint of basically brokering that transaction of a consumer charging something that is virtual in nature to their phone bill. And most of our customers have very vibrant economies that operate on virtual currencies, much the same way that countries and local economies operate on their own currencies. So you have all the same dynamics from inflation to deflation. You have arbitrage. You have all the same types of things that occur in the real world because it is a form of currency. It's not legal tender like most hard currencies are, but virtual currency behaves much the same way. Our largest customer is Facebook. They launched their own virtual currency months ago called Facebook Credits, and they're an interesting case study because they have 550 million users coming into their site every single day in hundreds of different countries. And they're looking to launch their own currency to facilitate transactions on their network. And it's something that never stops amazing us at ZONG, because we see people from Argentina to Singapore to Europe, anywhere in North America as well, making tons of transactions on their cell phones. And I don't know if you want me to get beyond an introduction or continue to talk about
a little bit about mobile, because that's such an important part of this.
Yeah, I mean, the mobile piece is significant because most people, when they're in an online environment and they're trying to buy something, any friction between starting a transaction and completing it is extremely important to do away with. So, for example, if you're buying a computer on Amazon, likely you're going to do some research. You're going to find what you want, and being able to type in a bunch of information about yourself and your address and your bank and this sort of thing isn't going to deter you from spending $2,000. If you're buying $10 worth of virtual currency, chances are anything that distracts you or prevents you from doing this quickly is going to potentially talk you out of that purchase or make it less likely that you complete it. And so ZONG's whole business is enter your mobile number, charge it to your phone bill, or we now support linking a credit card to your phone number as well, so you can facilitate those transactions more easily.
Which I think is brilliant. I mean, that ease of use and that comfort that people have with their billing systems from their carriers is a big step forward in terms of getting adoption rates up, I would think.
Absolutely. Most of the people who use our service actually have credit cards and bank accounts. But nevertheless, if you look at the macro view, there are about 5 billion cell phones in the world and about 2 billion credit card accounts, give or take. So there are a lot more people out there that have cell phones with value on them, and you could look at cell phone minutes as a form of currency in and of itself. So people are trading their airtime, so to speak, for virtual currency that they can then buy to play games or improve an avatar in a virtual world or all these other reasons.
I was talking with Paul Jacobs a year ago, and we're talking about mobile payments. And my thought has been for about, I think, 5 or 10 years, why aren't we seeing this in the United States, right? It's time. And Japan now has it. It's kind of coming on. What's the problem here? And he said, it's not me. It's not Qualcomm. It's that we go to the carriers, and they refuse to be banks. They have.
Right.
I said, do they understand how much money they're going to make here?
Right.
No, they're not interested. So I think for someone like you to show up and kind of be the interlocutor there and provide that facility is brilliant, because they are clearly brain dead when it comes to the biggest business opportunity that ever faced them. And you can take the money and thank them very much, and then get the billing done by their system, which is
That's right. I mean, their networks present a lot of obstacles for us. I mean, we're basically out there trying to acquire all kinds of transactions for mobile operators, and they charge an exorbitant fee to have the right to write a charge to their phone bill, making it very hard for us to handle transactions that are non-digital.
Yeah.
And so you basically need to have a high margin in order to operate with this kind of payment service. But we see that changing pretty rapidly. Actually, if you'd asked me last year, when will carriers wake up to the opportunity, I would have said, well, it'll be a couple of years, and it's already happening. Even in the US, we're getting deals now with carriers at around the 10%, which still seems very high relative to what card issuing banks and Visa networks.
There's so much money involved here that if it doesn't keep going the way you're saying, some new carrier will come in, a new Alltel or somebody, and just wipe the slate, because it's really important.
Potentially. I mean, the regulatory issues are a big consideration in all this, and other people I'm sure will have a lot to say about that on this panel. But
if I could trade my whole wallet for my cell phone, why wouldn't I use the new Alltel? Yeah, I would.
Right.
Okay, we're coming back to you.
Okay.